All right, welcome everybody to the Art of Healing with your host, Dr. Judy Jasek of Animal Healing Arts and Matt Rowe of ParsleyPet. During our show, we are talking about your pet's health, raw feeding, and alternative treatments for cancer, unexplained illnesses, and supporting your pet's natural ability to heal. Welcome, Dr. Judy, to this week's show.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday as well. I'm needing this weekend. So something to regroup, recenter, re-get everything back online.
Yeah, so important to take a step back. So easy to forget that when you're, running my own business. So easy to get wrapped up, and you can just work every day, and but then it starts to catch up with you. You got to take that step back and get out in nature. That's important.
Yes. And that's actually, I'm going to take Leo for a nature walk and try to get out for an actual hike and be out, because it's a beautiful time of year here in Colorado.
Oh, it is. Oh, I love the fall. I love the fall.
And just enjoy as much as I can with my puppies. So what is today's show about?
Well, we were going to talk about mold, which is interesting topic because it can be kind of a hidden cause of disease, and one that we don't often think about. And I think especially here in Colorado, because it's a relatively dry climate. Mold grows where there's moisture. Like you were talking about, your sister-in-law had mold in her house, and she had, I think you said, a leaky pipe or something in the wall. Yeah. So when you have something like that, you're going to get mold. And I know we had an incident a few years ago where our washing machine overflowed. The little whatever tells it to stop filling didn't stop from filling, so it overflowed. But it can do so much damage. Like you got to rip the floors up, you got to rip the baseboard up. It can ruin the walls. The moisture can get up in the walls, and you have to really be sure to dry everything out really well so that it doesn't grow, because it can be really, really sneaky. And I think it can cause a lot of chronic disease symptoms, and we might not think about it. So chronic inflammation. I actually have a client I work with, and she herself got really sick after a mold exposure. And she said she has a condition in her body. She has sort of an autoimmune type thing, and her body just wasn't able to eliminate it. And she's like still battling it. And she's been battling it for years. Like once it gets in the body, it's really hard to treat. And I think this comes down to keeping our bodies healthy. Which goes back to what we talk about: good nutrition, keeping the immune system strong, keeping the gut healthy. So when these organisms get into the body, the immune system is strong enough to deal with them and eliminate them. And the immune system is stable. So this is where I think, like not over vaccinating is really important, because you can get, people and animals both get like allergic reactions. I think I was telling you, I used to work on horses, and horses would eat moldy hay and they'd get chronic respiratory disease from it. And sometimes like you couldn't really get it to go away. You're always treating them with anti-inflammatories. And so this is an overreactivity of the immune system. We want to keep the immune system what I call modulated, where it's healthy, it's doing what we want it to do. We're not suppressing it, but it's not overreacting to things like mold. And I think it comes down to knowing that this is a potential. If we have chronic disease, are we looking in the premises? Could mold be a factor? And let's keep that immune system strong. Let's do that preventatively, because this is another thing that a good healthy diet, minimizing vaccines and pharmaceuticals and all these other things we talk about are going to help prevent.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about, like, in our dog's life and in our day-to-day, let's say there's mold in the corners of my house that I am unaware of, or there's mold in parts of my house. Well, my dog's nose is right there.
Right.
and it could go up and it could start sniffing that corner and could start pulling in some of those mold spores. Or let's say there's mold spores in the air and my dog is at home all day. And it's in some of those cases is your dog being exposed to some mold that you didn't even know that was in the home. And it was amazing to me when I heard the story from my sister-in-law about the mold in her home, how readily it is, and the person that came in to help mitigate that mold actually kicked the entire family out of the house, and they said this is a major issue. And she lives in New York, so it's a humid environment. And so when they had that, he goes, no, this happens on a regular basis. So it wasn't something just not having something clean properly, and or living in a wet environment, or this. It really is something that I think a lot of homes have. I mean, down from the story you told about your washing machine overfilling. I mean, how often do we have water in our homes that
Hmm.
just kind of goes unnoticed, or it goes, like not a big deal, it stopped leaking, it'll dry. But did mold start to grow in place of where that water was? And is something that is not, could be affecting you as an individual as well on the human side, but it could be affecting your dog. And so what kind of things you think I would see if my dog was around mold? And what kind of things, if I have an unexplained illness, what would mold exposure show up as?
I think a big one for dogs is respiratory, for exactly the reason that you said. Dogs are down there sniffing, they're using their noses
Mm-hmm.
all the time. So they're so susceptible to breathing in those spores. So
Mm-hmm.
chronic nasal discharge,
Okay.
sneezing and coughing. So these respiratory symptoms. So the runny nose,
Mm-hmm.
even like a bloody discharge would be even a more severe symptom. But
Okay.
the mold could cause enough damage. It can actually damage the inside of the nasal cavity to the point
Okay.
that it could bleed. So chronic respiratory,
Mm-hmm.
all dogs do a little bit of this, what we call reverse sneezing, which sounds like
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of trying to clear their throat.
Yeah.
So if that became really persistent and really excessive, like they're just doing it kind of
Okay.
all the time, all dogs are going to do it occasionally, and all dogs are going to cough and sneeze occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Agreed.
I don't think we need to panic if our dog
Mm-hmm.
is coughing and sneezing a little bit, but it's when it's persistent, and they're probably going to be a bit lethargic. They're probably not going to
Okay.
feel good. They're going to have inflammation in their airways. They
Mm-hmm.
may not be getting quite enough oxygen in their airways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so chronic symptoms like that, and even like just, chronic malaise, like, oh gosh, my dog just doesn't have the energy that it used to.
Mm-hmm.
It would be worth doing, probably some basic workup. Like we were saying,
Mm-hmm.
it's a hard thing to definitively diagnose. So if
Mm-hmm.
we had this chronic sneezing or coughing, you could do x-rays of the nasal cavity, and some of these molds will actually eat away at the inside of the nasal cavity.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that on
Mm-hmm.
x-rays. You can x-ray the lungs, look for lesions in the lungs, and
Sure.
see if there's anything there. I think basic blood work, you might see something show up. Like you might have an elevated white blood cell count, which says the body's fighting something. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
say it's mold, but it would say, hey, the body
Mm-hmm.
is fighting something. And then I think also, when it comes to treatment,
Mm-hmm.
I of course do things more holistically, but I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important to not just necessarily jump on the like antifungal type drugs. If the
Mm-hmm.
case is severe enough, we might need to do something like that for a while, but those drugs are really harsh. They have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of side effects. They can be really hard on the body. So more natural means of supporting the immune system,
Mm-hmm.
natural um, antifungals like colloidal silver and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, nasal rinses, maybe things like that. Ozone, which I do.
Mm-hmm.
Ozone will actually eliminate help eliminate pretty much any microorganisms. And I can actually
Right.
do a breathing treatment where pets can actually breathe it in. So if we have something going
Okay.
on in the nasal cavity, they can actually breathe in the ozone, and we can give it systemically. And that can, that can really help. Probably things like IV vitamin C, which can really help calm down some of these allergic reactions, things like that. It's tough. It's tough to get it out of the body. So keeping it out of the environment is probably the most important thing to address. So yeah, if you ever have water in your house, it's a pain. I mean, we had to, when our washing machine overflowed, I mean, we had to replace a whole bunch of flooring because once it got under the flooring, we knew there's that risk of the mold growing. And we had to tear up a whole, where it's like you look and like everything looks fine. It doesn't really look like anything's damaged, but once that water gets underneath the floors, then you run the risk of the mold growing, and you don't want that.
Yeah, no. And like you said, it's very difficult to remove. So really, if at that point, if my dog is experiencing some of those unexplained illnesses or coughing a little bit, I go to my vet and they're like, well, we think it's this, the white blood cell count, you had blood work done, you had all that stuff. And it really is, you still don't have a definitive answer in looking at that. Is then at that point, call somebody to come into your home and to take a look at, somebody to inspect if there's mold in there, or even under, your own presence, take a look at where your water hookups are to your washing machine, to your dishwasher, to your, your sinks in your bathrooms. You're take a look at all these areas where water could be coming into the house, and go take a look to see if you see a stain coming down the wall, or see if you see a stain on the floor, see if you see some of this stuff could be something indicative that you have a water leak, that mold could be growing. Now, what I've been told is that in some cases you won't see the mold that's growing because it's underneath your subfloors, or it's underneath somewhere else in the home, where it's not really right there at surface level, but it's still happening underneath. And so we don't see the mold essentially. So that's why I recommended having somebody come in and take a look to see, like somebody that's going to inspect the mold in there to make sure that you are taking control of that and getting on top of it. Because it is one of those things that once it starts to creep in, very, very difficult to remove, like you said.
And even check around, like I've noticed sometimes, like cleaning the bathrooms, like you get out of the shower and you drop a little bit of water, before you're dried off, but you do that over and over and over again, and you kind of miss those little droplets. And then all of a sudden you look in the corner of your bathroom and you got all this black stuff growing, it's just things like that, just that little bit of extra moisture. You got to really, really stay on top of that. And of course, it's best to use non-toxic things that would kill mold. Things like peroxide, or even some essential oils can be really, really powerful. Actually, thyme and oregano are really great. And they're antibacterial, antiviral. I put some essential oils in vinegar and water mixture, and I use that. It makes the house smell like salad dressing, but it's safer than doing bleach. Don't use bleach. That's kind of the bottom line. Chlorine bleach is so toxic. I can't breathe it. I get headaches and chest pain breathing in even a little bit of bleach. It's very toxic. So, if you see mold, find a non-toxic way of eliminating it. Even something like a stronger hydrogen peroxide would probably help eliminate it. But you want to definitely use some natural products to eliminate it.
Now, you had mentioned thyme and oregano, and that's an essential oil that is a natural antifungal. In there. So putting, I don't know how many drops you like to mix. My wife knows all this, as Jamie. And so I don't know if it's 5, 10, 15 drops in a solution of water or vinegar that you can actually just go spray on the actual mold that you see, the black mold in the shower and all that type of stuff. That'll start to eat that fungus away and get rid of it, and then allow you to remove it out of there. And so it's something that's really, I feel, is extremely important. But I liked how you talked about the breath treatments. for example, if my little Chihuahua, starts coughing a lot and I think it's mold, and we kind of come to that conclusion, is instead of going under an antifungal medicine, because it's extremely harsh for the body, is going more to like a breathing treatment or something like that to try to, get it at that that lung level.
Yeah, I've had really good success with the ozone, treating chronic coughs where we don't know the reason. And so, is it mold? Like, I don't know, but I have a couple of patients that I do respiratory treatments on. One of my little dogs, sometimes, he'll get up in the morning and he'll be hacking a little bit. Just sounds kind of phlegmy. Well, we've had the smoke and all that, but I'll do some ozone treatments on him because then I'm kind of covering the bases. I mean, ozone, it reduces inflammation. So if it is just irritation from the smoke and the particulates in the air, or it is he did breathe in some mold or something like that. And they can pick it up outside. And there's mold spores everywhere. So just sniffing around in the grass, when they're out on walks and out in the garden. I mean, there's mold spores everywhere. You don't have to have a big mold problem in your house. So yeah, I think like the respiratory ozone, this is an ideal case for it. And it's so safe. There's no side effects. There's no downside to it.
Right. And really getting at it. But you brought up a great point, is that mold can be anywhere. So, I mean, even your example of the horses with the moldy hay and them breathing that in when they're eating it was causing lung infection and some upper respiratory infections in the actual horse itself. And so when you're looking at your puppy and your dog is out there playing around, God knows if they run into a moldy patch of grass that somebody had cut and left in the out in the field, and your dog goes up to it because a mouse ran in there and he wants to go try to catch a mouse, but the whole time he's doing it, he's breathing in the mold spores.
Yep. I think this is a big issue in the springtime when the snow melts and the grass isn't growing yet. And you can almost see like sometimes stuff growing on the surface of the grass before the grass comes to life. Because then I think there's enough of a natural ecosystem that the mold isn't as likely to grow. But while that grass is still dormant from the wintertime and you have all this moisture sitting on it, and then it melts off. And I think that can be a big source of mold too. The grass is laying down and it's moist and it's not growing. It's not doing its thing yet. I think that can be a big source. I do see symptoms show up that time of year. I'm not quite sure what they are, but I often think, this could be, their dogs are out there breathing in some mold spores on their walks.
Right. And their noses right to the ground. So this is awesome, Dr. Judy. You've got my wheels turning on where I could actually go start taking a look at different areas of my house and actually taking a look at my backyard, my play area for both of my dogs. So if I think my dog has been contracted with mold, what is the best way to get a hold of you, Dr. Judy?
Well, my website is ahavet.com. Animal Healing Arts is the name of my practice. My email is info@ahavet.com, and my phone number is 720-515-2421.
Now, do you offer a telemedicine package, like something where I could actually have a conversation with you, even if I'm not in the state?
I do phone or Zoom. So sometimes people want to show me things on their animals, or, they just want to, look at somebody instead of talking on the phone. Yes, I offer both. I definitely do those types of consultations.
And I highly recommend it. Dr. Judy is my vet, and I'm so pleased every time I go and talk to her. And it's one of those things where I feel empowered as a pet parent. I actually know where I should go, what should I do. And I know I have a doctor in my corner that if I need to call, if I need to check on something, it's something that I can do. And, definitely respecting the time and all that type of stuff. But it's something that I know that I have somebody in my corner that can help us out. So I highly recommend reaching out to Dr. Judy. And you can always reach out to us at ParsleyPet, ParsleyPet.com, if you want to test the nutrients inside your dog and make sure they are receiving the ideal diet for them so that it can promote health and happiness and this longevity that we want all of our puppies to live in. Come to ParsleyPet.com and come check out the nutritional blueprint. So Dr. Judy, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I hope you have an incredible weekend.
Yeah, you too, Matt. Enjoy getting outside, enjoying some of the beautiful fall in Colorado.
Yeah, I know Leo will have no complaints on going out and sniffing everything he can.
Just make sure he avoids the mold.
The mold, no mold. Yeah, the dry spots.
Right, exactly.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you, Dr. Judy.
All right, you're welcome. Take care, Matt.
See ya.